She sat quietly on the back steps, lunchbox in her lap, hands still smelling of bleach. Inside, the dining hall was full, laughter, clinking forks, warm meals. But not for her. Cleaners don't eat with guests, someone had said. So she nodded, like always, and stepped aside. No one noticed her at first. She was part of the background, silent, invisible, just someone who wiped up after others. Until the sound of small footsteps broke the routine, and a tiny voice rang out. "Mom!" Everyone turned. A little girl pushed through the crowd, running straight into her arms. The cleaner froze for a second, then smiled, hugging her tightly. Whispers rippled through the room. Confusion, shock, realization. Because the woman they had made eat outside wasn't just a cleaner. She was a mother to the child they all loved. And in that moment, the distance they had created crumbled, one small hug at a time. Welcome to Heroes Unheard. From which city in the world are you watching this video today? If you think stories like this need to be heard, hit that subscribe button to support the channel. We're growing every day, and I sincerely thank you for being a part of it. The Riverside Academy stood like a fortress of privilege overlooking the Hudson River, its ivy-covered brick walls and manicured grounds serving as both sanctuary and symbol for New York's most elite families. Founded in 1847, the school had educated generations of American aristocracy, presidents' children, tech dynasty heirs, entertainment royalty, and old money families whose names appeared on Manhattan's most prestigious buildings. The annual Parent-Teacher Conference Day was Riverside's most important social event, a carefully orchestrated gathering where the school's most influential families came together to discuss their children's education while reinforcing the social networks that would shape their offspring's futures. The Great Hall had been transformed for the occasion, its soaring ceilings and stained glass windows providing an appropriately majestic backdrop for conversations about academic achievement and character development. Elegant buffet tables stretched along the hall's perimeter, laden with delicacies prepared by Manhattan's most exclusive catering company. The spread included items that most people couldn't pronounce, let alone afford. Imported cheeses aged in European caves, wines that cost more per bottle than minimum wage workers earned in a month, and pastries crafted by award-winning chefs whose restaurants required reservations months in advance. The parents who filled the hall represented the pinnacle of American success and influence. Senator Patricia Blackwood discussed her daughter's Latin studies with a Supreme Court justice's wife. Tech billionaire Marcus Chun compared notes on mathematics curricula with a media mogul whose networks shaped global opinion. These were people accustomed to being the most important individuals in any room they entered, whose casual conversations could influence stock markets and political outcomes. The dress code was unspoken but absolute. Designer suits that cost more than cars, jewelry that could fund universities, and accessories that served as subtle indicators of wealth and status. Every detail of appearance and behavior was carefully calibrated to communicate belonging in this rarefied atmosphere where exclusivity was the most valued currency. Dr. Harrison Whitmore, the school's headmaster, moved through the crowd with practiced ease, greeting parents by name and demonstrating the kind of personal attention that justified tuition costs exceeding the median household income. He had mastered the delicate art of managing enormous egos while maintaining the school's reputation for academic excellence and social prestige. The teaching staff, carefully selected for their credentials and ability to meet the demanding expectations of influential families, circulated with professional confidence. These were educators who understood that their success depended not just on academic results, but on their ability to navigate complex social dynamics and maintain relationships with parents who could make or break careers with casual recommendations. Among the attendees was 8-year-old Sophia Chun, daughter of the tech billionaire, whose presence at such events was considered part of her social education. She moved through the adult conversations with the precocious confidence of someone who had been raised to expect attention and deference, her designer dress and carefully styled hair marking her as a member of the next generation of American elite. Sophia had learned early that the world revolved around people like her family, that their comfort and preferences took precedence over lesser considerations, that their social position granted them privileges that others could only observe from a distance. The concept of genuine hardship was as foreign to her as poverty or want. abstract ideas that existed somewhere beyond the protective boundaries of her privileged existence. What Sophia didn't understand, what none of the assembled elite comprehended, was that their perfect afternoon was being made possible by people they never saw, never acknowledged, and certainly never considered worthy of sharing their social space. The gleaming floors they walked on, the spotless windows they gazed through, the pristine restrooms they used, all were maintained by individuals whose existence was carefully hidden from view. Maria Santos had been working at Riverside Academy for 3 years, employed by the cleaning service that maintained the school's immaculate appearance. She arrived each morning at 5 o'clock, hours before the first students or teachers appeared, and worked with quiet efficiency to ensure that every surface gleamed with the perfection expected by families who paid premium prices for premium environments. At 42, Maria carried herself with the dignity of someone who took pride in honest work, despite the circumstances that had led her to spend her days cleaning up after people who earned more in a week than she made in a year. Her hands bore the calluses of someone who scrubbed floors and polished fixtures. Her back ached from years of bending and lifting, but her spirit remained unbroken by the indifference of those she served. She spoke English with the careful precision of someone who had learned it as an adult out of necessity rather than choice, her accent marking her as foreign in a place where such origins were viewed as automatically disqualifying for social acceptance. Her clothes were clean and pressed, but inexpensive, chosen for durability and function rather than fashion or status. What the wealthy parents and prestigious faculty never knew, what Maria kept carefully hidden beneath her professional invisibility, was that she had her own dreams and struggles that were just as important as theirs. She was working multiple jobs to put herself through night school, studying to become a certified teacher while supporting a family that depended on her income for survival. More importantly, Maria was raising a daughter whose intelligence and potential rivaled that of any child in Riverside's exclusive classrooms, but whose opportunities were limited by circumstances beyond her control. 8-year-old Isabella was everything Maria had hoped to become: brilliant, curious, determined, and possessed of a natural kindness that had somehow survived the hardships that shaped their daily lives. The parent-teacher conference day had been in progress for 2 hours when Maria finally took her lunch break, stepping away from the utility closet where she had been organizing cleaning supplies while the elegant gathering continued in the great hall. Her shift began at dawn and wouldn't end until evening, but the brief respite allowed her to sit quietly and eat the simple sandwich she had packed that morning. She had learned through 3 years of experience that her presence during such events was tolerated only as long as she remained completely invisible. The wealthy parents and distinguished faculty had no desire to be reminded that their pristine environment was maintained by people whose social status placed them permanently outside their consideration. Maria found a small alcove near the service entrance, a space hidden from the main gathering where she could eat without disturbing the important conversations taking place in the great hall. She was accustomed to such arrangements, understanding that her role was to facilitate the comfort of others while ensuring her own presence never intruded on their experience. As she unwrapped her sandwich, she could hear the sounds of laughter and animated discussion drifting from the main event. Parents were sharing stories of their children's achievements, comparing notes on college preparatory strategies, and making social connections that would benefit their families for generations. It was a world that operated according to rules she understood but could never participate in. What Maria didn't know was that she was being watched by Mrs. Catherine Worthington, the mother of one of Riverside's most prominent students and the wife of a hedge fund manager whose wealth influenced political outcomes across multiple states. Mrs. Worthington had noticed Maria's presence during previous school events and had developed strong opinions about appropriate boundaries between staff and the families they served. "Excuse me," Mrs. Worthington said, approaching Maria's alcove with the authority of someone accustomed to having her wishes immediately implemented. "This area is not appropriate for staff dining. You'll need to eat outside or in whatever designated area has been provided for service personnel." Maria looked up from her sandwich, surprised by the confrontation but not entirely shocked by its content. She had encountered similar situations before and had learned that resistance only made things worse for everyone involved. "I'm sorry," she said quietly, beginning to gather her simple lunch. "I was just trying to stay out of the way during the event. I'll find somewhere else." "It's not about staying out of the way," Mrs. Worthington replied, her voice carrying the kind of casual cruelty that came from never questioning her own superiority. It's about maintaining appropriate boundaries. This is a private school event for families and faculty, not a public space where anyone can eat lunch. Other parents had noticed the interaction and were beginning to gather, their curiosity piqued by the unusual sight of someone challenging what they perceived as an obvious boundary violation. Their expressions reflected various degrees of disapproval and satisfaction that someone was finally addressing what they considered an inappropriate situation. "She's right," agreed Mr. Bradford Ashworth, whose family name appeared on buildings throughout Manhattan. "We pay substantial tuition fees partly to ensure that our children are educated in an environment that maintains certain standards. Having service personnel eating in the same spaces as families during important events is simply not acceptable." Maria stood slowly, her dignity intact despite the public humiliation being directed at her. She had faced worse challenges than entitled parents who viewed her as less than human, and she understood that arguing would only make the situation more difficult for everyone. "I understand," she said simply, wrapping her sandwich and preparing to leave. "I'll eat outside." The group of parents watched with satisfaction as Maria gathered her belongings, their sense of social order restored by the successful enforcement of boundaries they considered essential to their children's proper development. They returned to their conversations about academic achievement and character building, confident that they had handled an inappropriate situation with appropriate firmness. Mrs. Worthington felt particularly pleased with herself, believing she had performed a valuable service by maintaining the school's standards and protecting the exclusive atmosphere that justified the substantial fees they paid. She rejoined her husband's conversation about their son's acceptance to a prestigious summer program, the incident already forgotten as a minor administrative matter. Maria made her way toward the service exit, prepared to spend her brief lunch break sitting on the steps outside the building where she cleaned floors and scrubbed bathrooms for people who couldn't bear to share indoor space with her. She had learned to accept such treatment as part of the price she paid for honest work in a world that judged worth by bank accounts rather than character. But as she approached the exit, something unexpected happened that would shatter the comfortable assumptions of everyone present and force them to confront the gap between their stated values and their actual behavior. The Great Hall's main doors opened with a burst of childish energy, and 8-year-old Isabella Santos came running through, her backpack bouncing as she searched the crowd for someone specific. She had been attending an after-school program at a nearby community center and had come to Riverside to meet her mother, as they had planned earlier that morning. Isabella's presence immediately drew attention, not because she was doing anything wrong, but because she clearly didn't belong in this gathering of elite families. Her clothes were clean but inexpensive, her backpack was from a discount store rather than a luxury retailer, and her general appearance marked her as an outsider in this carefully curated environment. "Excuse me, little girl," said Dr. Whitmore, approaching with the kind of professional concern that suggested he was prepared to handle what appeared to be a lost child situation. "Are you looking for someone? Are you supposed to be here?" Isabella looked around the hall with wide eyes, taking in the elegant decorations and well-dressed adults who were all staring at her with various degrees of curiosity and concern. But she wasn't intimidated by their wealth or status. She was simply looking for the most important person in her world. Then she saw Maria near the service exit, preparing to leave the building with her lunch, and Isabella's face lit up with the joy that only children can express when they spot someone they love unconditionally. "Mom," she cried out, her voice carrying clearly across the suddenly silent great hall as she dropped her backpack and ran toward Maria with arms outstretched. The word hung in the air like a thunderclap, its implications rippling through the assembled crowd with the force of a seismic shift. Every conversation stopped mid-sentence. Every champagne glass froze halfway to lips. Every expression of casual superiority transformed into shocked recognition of a fundamental miscalculation. Isabella reached Maria and threw her arms around her mother's waist, her face glowing with the uncomplicated happiness of a child who had been reunited with her favorite person in the world. "I finished my homework early, so Mrs. Johnson said I could come meet you here like we planned." Maria's face cycled through multiple emotions: joy at seeing her daughter, embarrassment at the public attention, in growing alarm as she realized the magnitude of what Isabella's presence had just revealed to a room full of people who had spent the afternoon treating her as invisible and subhuman. "Isabella," she said softly, kneeling to her daughter's level while acutely aware of hundreds of eyes focused on their interaction. "You're early, sweetheart. I'm not finished with work yet." But Isabella was too excited to notice the uncomfortable silence that had descended over the great hall. "That's okay, I can wait. Can I help you clean? I know how to do the windows really good, and I promise I won't break anything expensive." Her innocent offer to help with cleaning duties hit the assembled elite like a physical blow, forcing them to confront the reality that they had just spent 20 minutes humiliating a child's mother for the crime of eating lunch in the same building where her daughter might theoretically be educated if the world operated according to different principles. Mrs. Worthington stood frozen, her earlier satisfaction replaced by growing horror as she realized the implications of what she had just done. She had publicly degraded a mother in front of a room full of people, based solely on social prejudice and assumptions about worth that had just been exposed as both cruel and wrong. Dr. Whitmore approached slowly, his administrative instincts telling him that this situation required careful handling, but his personal shock making it difficult to know what approach would be appropriate. "I'm sorry," he said to Maria. "I wasn't aware that you had a daughter." "There's no reason you would be," Maria replied quietly, her arm protectively around Isabella's shoulders. "My personal life doesn't affect my work here." But Isabella, with the fearless honesty that only children possess, looked around at the elegantly dressed adults and made an observation that cut to the heart of the situation's absurdity. "Why is everyone looking at us funny? Did I do something wrong?" The question hung in the air because no adult present could figure out how to explain that they had been shocked to discover that the woman they had just humiliated for eating lunch indoors was someone's mother, someone's most important person, someone who deserved the same basic respect they automatically granted to people who shared their social status. Mr. Bradford Ashworth found himself staring at Isabella with uncomfortable recognition. She was clearly intelligent, articulate, and well-behaved. Exactly the kind of child he would expect to succeed in an environment like Riverside if given the opportunity. But the accident of her birth into a working-class family had placed such opportunities permanently beyond her reach. "No, sweetheart," Maria said to her daughter. "You didn't do anything wrong. These people are just surprised to meet you." Isabella studied the crowd with the frank curiosity of someone too young to understand social hierarchies or the unspoken rules that governed interactions between different classes. "Are they nice people?" she asked, her question innocent but devastating in its implications. Because how could any of them claim to be nice people after what they had just witnessed? How could they consider themselves good parents, devoted to their children's character development, after spending an afternoon treating someone else's mother like she was less than human? Mrs. Catherine Worthington, who had initiated the confrontation that led to this moment of reckoning, found herself face to face with the consequences of her casual cruelty. She looked at Isabella, bright, curious, clearly loved and well cared for, and realized that her actions had been witnessed by someone who would remember this moment for the rest of her life. We made a mistake," Mrs. Worthington said finally, her voice barely above a whisper. "We weren't being nice at all." The admission seemed to break something loose in the room, allowing other parents to acknowledge what they had all participated in through their silence and approval. They had created a situation where a hard-working mother had been publicly humiliated for the crime of existing in the same space as people who considered themselves her betters. Dr. Whitmore made a decision that would define both his career and his character. He approached Maria and Isabella, his voice carrying genuine regret rather than administrative politeness. "Mrs. Santos," he said, "I owe you a profound apology. What happened here today was unacceptable, and it reflects poorly on our school's values and the behavior we expect from our community." He turned to address the crowd, his voice growing stronger as he found his moral footing. "Maria Santos has been maintaining our school with dedication and professionalism for 3 years. She arrives before dawn and works long after most of us have gone home. She makes it possible for our children to learn in a beautiful, clean environment, and we just treated her with disrespect that violates everything we claim to value." The silence that followed was heavy with shame and recognition. These were people who prided themselves on their sophistication and moral superiority, who spent fortunes educating their children about character and values, but who had just demonstrated that their principles didn't extend to people they considered beneath their notice. Isabella looked up at her mother with concern, sensing the tension in the room even if she didn't understand its source. "Are you okay, Mom? You look sad." Maria knelt down to her daughter's level, her voice steady despite the emotional weight of the moment. "I'm okay, sweetheart. Sometimes adults make mistakes and have to learn how to do better." The simplicity of her response, the grace with which she handled a situation that would have justified anger or resentment, made her moral superiority to the assembled elite undeniable and absolute. Resolution plus OUTRO, scenes 5 to 6. In the silence that followed Maria's gentle explanation to her daughter, something extraordinary began to happen. The artificial barriers that had separated the wealthy parents from the woman who cleaned their children's schools started to dissolve, replaced by a recognition of shared humanity that should have been obvious from the beginning. Mrs. Worthington approached Maria with visible difficulty, her usual confidence replaced by genuine remorse. "Mrs. Santos, I was completely wrong to treat you the way I did. There's no excuse for my behavior, and I want to apologize not just to you, but to your daughter as well." She knelt down to Isabella's level, her voice soft with regret. "Sweetheart, your mom is a wonderful person who takes very good care of our school. I was being mean to her, and that was wrong of me. I'm sorry." Isabella studied Mrs. Worthington's face with the serious attention children give to adult apologies, then nodded with the gravity of someone accepting responsibility for resolving conflict. "It's okay. My mom says everyone makes mistakes sometimes, but you should try to be nicer next time." The innocent wisdom of her response brought tears to several eyes, her ability to forgive what adults had complicated with pride and prejudice serving as a lesson in grace that would be remembered long after the formal education ended. Dr. Whitmore made another decision that would transform not just the remainder of the afternoon, but the culture of Riverside Academy going forward. "Mrs. Santos, would you and Isabella join us for lunch? I think our community would benefit from getting to know both of you better." Maria hesitated, unsure whether the invitation was genuine or merely an attempt to manage an embarrassing situation. But Isabella had no such reservations. She was hungry, curious about the elegant spread she had glimpsed, and excited by the possibility of sharing a meal with so many interesting adults. "Can we, Mom? I promise I'll use good manners and not spill anything." Maria looked around at faces that had transformed from hostile to ashamed to genuinely welcoming, recognizing that this moment offered an opportunity for healing that extended beyond her personal situation. "If you're sure we're welcome, we'd be honored to join you." What followed was unlike any social gathering in Riverside Academy's prestigious history. Isabella became the center of attention not because of her family's wealth or status, but because of her natural intelligence, curiosity, and the kind of authentic charm that couldn't be purchased or taught in exclusive prep schools. She asked thoughtful questions about the careers and interests of the adults around her, listened with genuine attention to their responses, and offered observations that were both insightful and refreshingly honest. The parents found themselves genuinely impressed by her intelligence and character, forced to acknowledge that exceptional children could emerge from any background when they were loved and nurtured properly. Maria, initially shy about participating in conversations with people who had treated her as invisible, gradually relaxed as she realized that their interest in Isabella was genuine and their respect for her own intelligence was growing. She found herself discussing education, child development, and community issues with people who discovered that her insights were valuable precisely because they came from a different perspective than their usual social circle. "Isabella is clearly gifted," observed Dr. Elizabeth Harrison, a child psychologist whose own daughter attended Riverside. "Has she been tested for acceleration or enrichment programs?" "We haven't had access to those opportunities," Maria replied honestly. "The public schools she attends are overcrowded and underfunded. But I work with her at home every evening, and she's always been eager to learn." The conversation that followed revealed the vast disparities in educational opportunity that existed just miles apart in the same city. Isabella was receiving a fraction of the resources and support that Riverside students took for granted, despite possessing equal or superior natural abilities. Senator Patricia Blackwood, whose educational policy work had previously focused on abstract principles rather than individual cases, found herself genuinely moved by the contrast between Isabella's potential and her limited opportunities. "This is exactly the kind of situation our scholarship programs should be addressing," she said. "What scholarship programs?" Dr. Whitmore asked, realizing that his school's financial aid initiatives had been woefully inadequate compared to the actual need in their community. The remainder of the afternoon evolved into an impromptu planning session for expanding Riverside's outreach and scholarship programs, with Isabella serving as the inspiring example of what was possible when exceptional children were given appropriate opportunities. The parents who had arrived expecting to discuss their own children's advantages found themselves motivated to create similar opportunities for students like Isabella. Maria watched these conversations with amazement, understanding that her daughter's natural charm and intelligence were opening doors that had seemed permanently closed. But more importantly, she saw that the elite parents were learning lessons about prejudice and opportunity that their expensive educations had failed to provide. Mrs. Worthington became one of the most vocal advocates for change, her earlier behavior motivating her to become a champion for inclusive policies that would prevent future incidents of discrimination. "We need to examine all our assumptions about merit and worth," she said. "Today proved that we've been missing extraordinary people because we were only looking in familiar places." As the event concluded, Dr. Whitmore made an announcement that would become part of Riverside Academy's legacy. "Starting immediately, we're establishing the Isabella Santos Scholarship Fund, designed to identify and support exceptional students from underserved communities. We're also implementing new policies to ensure that all members of our school community, regardless of their role, are treated with the dignity and respect they deserve." The scholarship was funded within hours by parents who had been transformed by their encounter with Isabella and their recognition of their own prejudices. But the more significant change was cultural. Riverside Academy became known for its commitment to genuine diversity and its recognition that excellence could emerge from any background. Isabella was awarded the first scholarship in her own name, beginning her Riverside education the following semester. But she never forgot her mother's grace under pressure, or the lesson that treating others with kindness was more important than any academic achievement. Maria continued working at Riverside, but now as a valued member of the community rather than an invisible service provider. Her insights about education and child development were sought by parents and faculty who had learned to value perspectives that came from different experiences. Years later, when Isabella graduated as valedictorian and headed to Harvard on a full scholarship, she used her commencement speech to honor her mother's strength and to challenge her classmates to recognize the potential that existed in people they might overlook or dismiss. "My mother taught me that worth isn't measured by wealth or status, but by how we treat others when we think no one important is watching," Isabella said. "The adults who changed their behavior after meeting me that day didn't become better people because I was special. They became better people because they learned to see my mother's humanity." The transformation that began with a simple word, "Mom," had rippled outward to change institutional policies, individual attitudes, and countless future opportunities for students who might otherwise have been overlooked. Isabella's presence had forced an entire community to confront their prejudices and commit to living up to their stated values. Maria's dignity in the face of humiliation had provided a moral example that influenced how the Riverside community treated all its members going forward. The staff appreciation programs, inclusive policies, and scholarship initiatives that followed all traced their origins to that moment when a little girl's love for her mother had revealed the gap between professed values and actual behavior. The alcove where Maria had been forced to eat alone was converted into a comfortable break room for all school employees, with a plaque reading, "Every person in our community deserves respect and dignity." It served as a daily reminder that genuine character was measured not by how people treated their equals, but by how they treated those with less power or status. This story was brought to you by Heroes Unheard. Have you ever known someone who never asked for recognition, but deserved more than anyone else? Tell us in the comments what they meant to you and how you remember them. And if you think stories like this need to be heard, hit that subscribe button to support the channel. We'll see you in the next one.